15-minute or less lecture series, Anatomy and Physiology, Chapter 19, Reproductive Systems, Part 1. The male and female reproductive systems have a primary function, which is to produce and nurture sex cells. In males, those are called sperm, and females, they are called oocytes. The male is primarily designed to transport sperm to the eggs. The primary organ is the testes that produces the sperm and hormones such as testosterone. The accessory sex organs is pretty much everything else related to the male's reproductive system. For instance, you have the scrotum, which is a skin and muscle sac that holds the two testes, and the testes are also held up and attached to what's called the spermatic cord. When you look at the scrotum, you see that's divided into two separate compartments. There's a scrotal septum or wall between the two testes. There are two layers of muscle tissues. There is the dartus muscle that is deep to the skin, and then there's the cremaster muscle, which is attached via the spermatic cord. And the testes are located hanging off of the trunk of the male's body in order to keep the temperature a couple of degrees below body temperature, which is ideal for the production of sperm. Within each testes, you see that it's broken down into many, many little lobules that are little compartments that house these tiny, tiny coiled up tubes called the seminiferous tubes. And these are lined with stratified epithelial cells and spermatogenic cells, that is sperm stem cells. And it's within these seminiferous tubules that the sperm are produced. So it all starts off with the stem cell, the spermatogenic cells, and those stem cells start off with 46 chromosomes. However, to make the sperm, we need it to be able to divide and produce sperm cells that only have 23 chromosomes. Also present, of course, is the sustenticular cells, those epithelial cells that help to support, nourish, and regulate the process of cell division for sperm production. So first we have the primary spermatocyte. Primary spermatocyte will then divide during the process of meiosis into two secondary spermatocytes, each now with 23 chromosomes. And then those will each divide to give us finally 4 spermatids, each with 23 chromosomes, each sperm that results from that being genetically distinct from each other as well as from the male. So you start off deep in the seminiferous tubule, the stem cell divides, one cell remains a stem cell, the other one becomes a primary spermatocyte, which then migrates toward the lumen or space within the seminiferous tubules as it divides to form the secondary spermatocytes and finally the spermatids, and then in the end you have the immature sperm found in the lumen, the space of the seminiferous tubules. There is also a structure called the blood-testes barrier that's formed by the sustenticular cells. They have tight junctions between each other, and their goal is to keep the bloodstream of the male separate from the seminiferous tubules. This is to protect the sperm from the male's immune response. Outside of the seminiferous tubules are additional cells called interstitial cells, and these cells, which happen to be near blood capillaries, produce the hormone testosterone that can then enter the bloodstream. All right, after the immature sperm leave the testes, they go into another series of ducts in a structure called the epididymis that lies on the top and back of the testis. And here in the epididymis, the sperm will mature, and the sperm will come to the shape that we expect with the head of the sperm, where the nucleus or DNA is, as well as a series of enzymes capping the top of the head called the achromosome, which helps to fertilize the egg cell. The midpiece, where there's lots of mitochondria to provide energy for flailing the tail or flagellum. All right, from here, the seminiferous tubules carry the sperm from the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis, and then from the epididymis, they will enter a long tube called the ductus deferens that runs through the spermatic cord. The ductus deferens then goes up into the abdominal cavity over the pubis of the os coxae. It'll go over the top of the urinary bladder and end in the posterior side of the urinary bladder. Here, when ejaculation occurs, the sperm will leave the ductus deferens and enter the ejaculatory duct. At the same time, fluids from the seminal vesicles will also enter the ejaculatory ducts and then enter the urethra, which will then send the sperm and additional fluids produced by the prostate and bulbourethral glands out of the penis. So again, epididymis, highly coiled it is going to send its sperm after they've matured to the ductus deferens. Ductus deferens, a long muscular tube that goes through the spermatic cord. Spermatic cord itself is a large structure, relatively speaking, that has the ductus deferens, nerves, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, etc. They go to and from the testes, since these are living organs that need proper nourishment and so forth. All right, again, ductus deferens sends by peristalsis, that's muscular contraction, the mature sperm up over the front of the hip bone, over the urinary bladder to store for a little while behind the urinary bladder. And this is an awful long trip for the teeny tiny sperm. All right, again, as I mentioned already, then we have the ductus deferens sending sperm through the ejaculatory duct. At the same time, the seminal vesicle will also send its fluids that it produces through the ejaculatory duct. And then reach the urethra, and as you can see, the beginning of the urethra is embedded in the prostate gland. Seminal vesicle, it's just a sac-like structure, produces an alkaline fluid that also includes fructose, a sugar for the sperm to use for energy production, and prostaglandins that helps cause muscular contractions in the female reproductive tract. The prostate gland, which is directly inferior to the urethra, directly inferior to the urinary bladder, surrounds the beginning of the urethra. The prostate gland secretes a thin, milky, acidic fluid, which has citrate, another compound needed for production of ATP, and also prostate-specific antigen, which helps to liquefy the semen once it enters the female reproductive tract. Prostate cancer, leading cause of death from cancer in men. It can be tested for by a digital rectal exam because obviously as cancer grows, the size of the prostate would also enlarge. All right, we have the bulbourethral glands. There are two of these. They are directly after the prostate. They secrete mucus. It helps lubricate the urethra and also acts as a component of the semen. Semen has about 120 million sperm cells per milliliter, has the secretions from the seminal vesicles, prostate gland, and bulbourethral glands. At this point, the sperm are not fully ready for fertilizing the egg. Instead, they have to undergo capacitization, which occurs after it enters the female reproductive tract, and this weakens the membrane around the chromosome so that the enzymes will be ready to penetrate the egg. The penis is a cylindrical organ, has three compartments of specialized tissues, the two corpora cavernosa, right and left, that fill with blood during erection, and the corpus spongiosum, which wraps around the urethra to keep the urethra open during an erection. The head of the penis is the glans penis, and when a male is born, it has a prepuce or foreskin around it, which sometimes gets removed by circumcision. Erection, the release of nitric oxide is the neurotransmitter that leads to increased blood flow into the corpora cavernosa. This causes swelling, increased fluid pressure, leading to an enlarged penis. And as you can see here, the veins are near the surface while the arteries are deep in the penile structure. And so the veins actually get pinched a bit as the penis erects, thereby making it more blood entering the penis than leaving and the swelling to occur. All right, some disorders. Cryptorchidism is when the testes do not descend into the scrotum when an infant is born. Priapism is a painful erection that lasts for a very long time. And acute and chronic prostatitis is an enlargement of the prostate that can lead to obstruction of urine flow, increased frequency of urination, and pain. Puberty. The hypothalamus controls the development of puberty in the male. Starts off by releasing the gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which then stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to release luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. Those go into the bloodstream, reach the testes. Luteinizing hormone will stimulate the interstitial cells to produce testosterone, and the follicle-stimulating hormone will stimulate the testicular cells to start the process of spermatogenesis, production of sperm. The testicular cells also secrete a hormone called inhibin, which then inhibits FSH so that when enough sperm has been produced, we don't keep stimulating more and more to be produced. Testosterone is first released as an embryo. This is what, at approximately 5 weeks age of the embryo, and this is what causes the external genitalia to start to form in the embryo. And then at puberty, testosterone is started to produce again, which leads to a lot of things: hairy chest, beard, growth spurt, higher metabolism, and so on. So these hormones go to the testes, and then the testosterone comes out and leads to all those various effects on the boy as he progresses through puberty to become a man. Micropenis is unusually small penis and occurs in only 0.6% of males. All right, female reproductive system functions include producing female sex hormones like estrogen, producing and maintaining oocytes or egg cells, transporting these cells to the site of fertilization, providing a favorable environment for the development of fetus, and of course the birth process. Ovaries are the primary sex organs. They are where the oocytes develop. During prenatal development, as the ovaries develop, they will develop with millions of primordial follicles, each follicle having a primary oocyte, a little egg cell, surrounded by specialized cells called follicular cells. And this means all the oocytes that a female is going to have are produced before she is even born. Then this process halts until puberty. By the time puberty comes, there's about 400,000 oocytes, and then during the woman's reproductive life, probably release about 400 to 500 oocytes through menstruation. Follicle maturity. At puberty, follicle-stimulating hormone initiates some of the primordial follicles to enlarge and become a primary follicle. It will then continue to enlarge and become bigger, called a secondary follicle or preantral follicle, and start to form a fluid-filled cavity within it. Eventually, that will be a large fluid-filled cavity with many, many cells surrounding the oocyte. These are known as the corona radiata, and this entire structure would be the mature follicle that is ready to rupture via ovulation. So again, this is a process of meiosis, but it is a delayed process and has some differences than what happens in the male. So you have the primary oocyte that gets produced when the woman is an embryo. Then it will get stimulated during oogenesis after puberty has started to divide, giving you a secondary oocyte and a polar body. Secondary oocyte gets most of the cytoplasm. So it's a very, very large cell with 23 chromosomes. The polar body will get very little cytoplasm and degrade. The mature follicle takes about 300 days to develop, but ovulation occurs every 28 days, so it's really a complex process, but we're going to oversimplify it. Ovarian cysts are fluid-filled sacs that can form on ovaries. They're non-cancerous, but they can cause pain and bleeding. Ovulation occurs when there is a burst in production of luteinizing hormone. This triggers the ovulation event to occur, and the secondary oocyte is released, surrounded by cells to protect it, the corona radiata. Then, after the oocyte is fertilized, so after the sperm cell has found and fertilized it, the oocyte will go through this second round of division, forming another large oocyte that then becomes the zygote, the fertilized cell, and another polar body which degrades. Be sure to like and subscribe below.